We have just learned the Supreme Court has ruled 5-4 to uphold a lower court ruling to block President Trump's new asylum restrictions pending appeal. I want to bring in CNN Supreme Court analyst Joan Biskupic. You have Chief Justice Roberts siding with the liberals here. Joan, this is a big blow to the Trump administration.
It really is, Pamela. And when you remember that in November, it was when the Trump administration put into effect new rules for people seeking asylum. Those are people who have a fear of persecution if they return to their home countries. And the Trump administration had said that people can't qualify or be eligible for asylum if they've crossed the southern border outside of these designated points of entry. And a lower court judge had blocked the effect of that. And President Donald Trump tweeted about that judge saying, oh, an Obama judge, and he suggested he would have better luck at the Supreme Court. But on the way to the Supreme Court, a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit based in California had similarly endorsed blocking this new policy. And today, with John Roberts joining the four liberals on the court, they put out a 5-4 order that said that they agree with the lower court's blocking of this policy. Now, just so viewers know, the four dissenters were the four most conservative justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and the two new Trump justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh.
So what's next here?
Okay, so here's what's important. This was at a preliminary stage. It wasn't a ruling on the merits of the new policy. It was a question of, can this policy take immediate effect? President Trump wanted it to take immediate effect, and lower court judges said no, it would be likely to be found unlawful. They didn't rule that it was unlawful. They just said the chances are this is not something that should take effect because it violates federal immigration law. The president can't outright make this new policy because it conflicts with prior treaties and prior immigration law. That's what the lower court judges who assessed this said. The Supreme Court did not issue a ruling. It was only an order, but it was an order based on an appeal from the Trump administration to reverse the injunction in place, the blocking of this policy. So now we'll have further litigation on the merits of it. But I do have to say, Pamela, that the Supreme Court, when it decides whether to let some new policy take effect or to block it, considers the likelihood that the challenge will or will not succeed on the merits. And I think this is a signal from a bare 5-justice majority with Chief Justice John Roberts joining those liberals to say this policy is likely unlawful. Again, it's just a signal at this point.
Just a signal, but it certainly doesn't bode well for its future. And just very quickly, before I go to the White House, we just learned today that Justice Ginsburg had these cancerous nodules removed from her lungs, and now she was part of this.
That's right, and that just points up why we care what happens to each of these justices, especially the senior justice on the liberal wing of this Supreme Court. They obviously had voted on it before she, at a point where she could cast a vote, and her vote was frankly predictable to oppose the implementation of this policy. But what we've learned today, Pam, is that she's had this surgery, that she apparently is doing okay, that they found some cancer, they got the cancer, they removed it, and that she's not enduring any follow-up treatment. So possibly everything's going to be okay for her. But as you know, she's already survived 2 very serious bouts with cancer, in 1999 colorectal cancer, and in 2009 very serious pancreatic cancer. So she's resilient.
Remarkable, though. After all of that, she was there for this. All right, Joan, stand by. I want to go to Chief White House Correspondent Jim Acosta to see if the White House is responding to this latest news of the 5-4 decision blocking Trump's asylum ban. As Joan noted, the president previously scolded the judge who had blocked the ban, saying this is an Obama judge, and he thought that the Supreme Court would rule in his favor. That didn't happen.
That didn't happen, Pam, and you're right. I mean, this is another example of our system of checks and balances stymieing the president on his immigration policies. And here he wanted to have these much tougher asylum restrictions, and the Supreme Court not going in his direction at the very same time that he's trying to get wall funding for the border with Mexico, and getting stymied by Democrats up on Capitol Hill, and even some Republicans who aren't willing to go along with it the way he's trying to ram things through right before Christmas. And so, yes, this is yet another defeat for the president on some of these hard right immigration stances. I do think we'll probably see some kind of statement coming out of the White House at some point this afternoon, Pam, because as you know, this issue is just so near and dear to their hearts over here. They're going to want to weigh in. The president's going to want to weigh in on all of this. But no question about it, this is definitely a defeat for a portion of the president's immigration policy. They have been talking for a long time about cracking down on these asylum claims. They feel like many of these asylum claims are not legitimate, and that the process is abused by people, as they like to characterize it, flooding across the border. People would challenge that characterization. But again, this is yet another defeat for the president on this issue of immigration, which, as you know, is very near and dear to his heart over here at the White House. Pam.
And this is just adding to the gut punches that the White House has been dealing with just in the past 48 hours. You had the resignation of General Mattis, the defense secretary. You have this looming government shutdown, criticism from both sides of the aisle on the president's Syria policy. And now this is not good news for the president on a day where he really should be celebrating signing this bipartisan bill on criminal justice reform.
Oh, that's right. I mean, this is a chaos Christmas for this White House, Pam. And in a normal scenario where the White House, where the president, where they're very much in control of the messaging that comes out on a daily basis, this would be Criminal Justice Reform Day over here at the White House. We just saw an event wrap up in the Oval Office just a couple of hours ago that had the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, our own Van Jones, Democratic and Republican lawmakers who came together on this issue of criminal justice reform. And the coverage of that has just been overwhelmed by a crisis of the president's own making, this government shutdown that he said that he wanted 10 days ago, that he's trying to rebrand as the Democratic shutdown, and also this stunning departure of the outgoing, I should say, Secretary of Defense James Mattis. We just saw a very stunning picture over here at the White House in the last several minutes, Pam. You might have seen it come across our email, of the outgoing Chief of Staff, General Kelly, shaking hands with the outgoing Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, out there on the driveway just outside the White House a short while ago. I mean, this is a picture of the departing stability of this administration, and it's obviously an image that's going to strike a lot of people in this town and across the country as just not a good harbinger of what's to come.